Hi everyone, today we got more sideways consolidation, that 55 EMA continuing to act as support. This is clearly a wedging pattern here, more consolidation. This could absolutely break either direction, but let's take a look at all of the charts and see what direction makes sense. Do me a quick favor and like and subscribe and watch the video till the end to help out the channel, and let's get started. In news today, they are saying that the tariff impact is going to be felt more next year, and that's part of why some of these companies are starting to reduce their headcounts. I don't necessarily know if that is absolutely accurate, but it is interesting. Is there going to be an increased impact as these tariffs kind of take hold? They've been in place for a little bit now, and they're definitely starting to have a little bit longer lasting impacts. But really, the market has shaken this off, not really caring too much about it. We can see reshoring of manufacturing could end up resulting in lower headcounts potentially. I think that would be interesting. Not super worried about that. At least from the labor front, I just don't really see that being an issue, especially when we're going to have all of these jobs that we're kind of already seeing hit the market with all of the actions taken by the Trump administration and ICE, which has deported a fair amount of people and at the very least put a lot of fear into companies because they know that ICE is out there and they are doing their job. Whether you agree with it or not, that's not really what we're talking about here, but it is happening, and the effects of that is that these companies that were hiring undocumented workers are now feeling the effects, and those jobs are going to have to be filled by legal residents, which again should kind of prop up these jobs numbers. So I'm not super worried about this, at least in the short term, but I think it'll be interesting to see how much of an impact this has over the next year or so. You can see employment has absolutely started to see a little bit of a decline in terms of jobs openings. GDP continues to be really, really nice at 3.9%, which is pretty strong, especially with the kind of jobs markets. You can see Amazon, for example, slashing 30,000 jobs, non-farms up by 119,000, which is kind of signaling that divergence there, right? You got other employers that are looking for people, whereas those kind of bigger companies are starting to potentially cut jobs, maybe cut back due to that tariff impact. Moving over to fear and greed, we're at a 24 from a 23, very, very small step up there. Still fear on momentum, still extreme fear on pretty much every other metric. Despite markets being pretty much at all-time highs, it's pretty interesting to see a lot of fear in the markets, despite the rally that we had, volatility turning back down a little bit more, safe haven demand stepping above that fear metric, and then junk bonds seeing a pretty big spike there. Interesting. We'll see if that has any follow through on the charts. Moving over to the economic calendar, Eurozone unemployment did step up just a little bit. No major impacts really. And then looking at tomorrow, global services PMI, fairly interesting. A little bit of soft data there. Non-manufacturing PMI, non-manufacturing prices. For Thursday, Atlanta Fed GDP still tracking at 3.9%. Really, really nice there. Initial jobless claims still hovering around the same numbers they have been for a while, and then we should get PCE data on Friday. Moving over to the charts here, you can see we did get an update of 0.19 on the day. You can see that kind of choppy sideways action. It's still sitting right on top of that kind of trend line here, that 55 EMA also in that same area at 681.26. You can see the momentum is basically zero. The RSI is kind of turning down here, but nothing's broken structurally. You still got the level there at 680. Would want to see that hold in here. Got above it, held that structure so far, which to me is at least a little bit bullish. You can see the momentum on the daily chart still a little bit bullish there. I'm still kind of looking for a little bit of a pullback, but I think we might get a little bit more sideways choppy before that happens. And then moving over to these tasty charts here, this looks a little bit more bullish. You can see that kind of low, higher low structure with a high, slightly higher high there. Still bullish conditions. Trailing stop 679.21. A little bit of volume on the session as well. Volume coming through on bullish and bearish moves, so nothing crazy there. I would say maybe a little bit more bearish than bullish on those volume spikes, but either way, I think this is still sideways choppy. And then you can see the 4-hour chart still bullish. You can see it came into that trailing stop, that higher low there, and then the trailing stop is 678.36 on the 4-hour. So again, still bullish conditions. Would want to see this push towards that upper band. I think we were just extended in here. We need a little bit more sideways choppy, a little bit more pullback in time. And then that daily chart, no changes here. Sideways choppy over the last 3 days, still in bearish conditions. So short-term bullish, medium to long-term bearish is the thesis for now. Moving over to the NASDAQ, a very different thesis here for the NASDAQ. NASDAQ just continued to go bullish here, headed towards that zone of resistance. In here, you can see my alert there just below the level, 624.30, the level 624.90. Maybe that needs to come down just a little bit here. Maybe put the alert in there, kind of right at the body of the candle from 10 November makes sense, which would actually be right on top of the price action. So maybe this level is just a little bit too far away. We'll see. Either way, though, this looks like a nice kind of top here. We had the breakout, came back, retested, and continued through there. Clearly relative outperformance from the NASDAQ. NASDAQ being the best on the board here. Momentum bullish, RSI bullish, volume ramping on that rally. So everything says a little bit of bullishness here, but just some hesitation in this previous high. Moving over to the NASDAQ here, you can see we bought pretty much right at the closing price, looking for a little bit more of a push up just with that relative outperformance and the break above this kind of previous hesitation here. Everything says that should go a little bit more bullish there. And then looking at that hourly chart, you can see holding that 8 EMA, that's what you'd want, looking for this to push towards that upper ATR band around 625, pretty much in line with the level we talked about, 624.90 in that same area above this high here. That's what we're looking for. You can see price is still above it, kind of hanging out in there, 622 or so, so a little bit above the buy price of 621.75. Either way, everything's still bullish here. Trailing stop 617.69. As long as this continues to hold this kind of structure, that should be bullish. And then looking at the 4-hour chart, trailing stop is all the way down here at 612, which is a little bit further away than I would like it, but 8 EMA in there, 620.60, would like that to continue to hold and then push towards that upper band again. 626 here on the 4-hour chart, so a little bit further away, giving a little bit more opportunity there. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, these don't look nearly as good here. You can see the Russell was down 0.18 here. Looks like it's continuing to sell. The level isn't broken yet, 244.46, which is the support, and it's hanging in there after hours, but it closed on the low, momentum stepping to bearish. That looks a little bit more bearish. I still think you could be looking for a higher low setup. You can see the RSI, if we pulled back right to the SMA here, that would take you to kind of 46.50 area. So there's a little bit of room for a fall, and then you would tag that SMA and get the higher low setup on this structure, and then that would potentially catapult you to some more highs. Ultimately, that would be interesting, but you still have to look at this structure as a high, kind of lower high setup, at least for now. And then looking at the Dow, we said this looked like a retest of the trend line, and that is still true. Momentum is a little bit bullish though, and RSI is a little bit bullish, but for now, this looks like a breakdown retest, potential for a breakdown. Moving over to the Mag 7. Mag 7 was positive, up 0.5%. Momentum bullish, RSI bullish, continues to push to that highly traded zone. You can see just how much volume there was in this area. Don't love that, right? We need to get above that and push if it's going to do it. If it continues to hold as a zone of resistance here, that's going to be a problem. We did get above the 55 EMA, which was something that we struggled with over the last 2 days, so that's a little bit bullish. But for now, this still looks like a little bit of a hesitation. We did close above the body of the previous 2 candles, so that is still technically bullish. But again, still looking at this as kind of a left shoulder head in here, and then potentially for a lower right shoulder. Moving over to Apple. What a move on Apple. We said this looked amazing yesterday, and sure enough, we got a big continuation on it. So Apple continues to look really strong, all-time highs. Price discovery continues to be a clean breakout above the level. Breakout, retest, breakout, continues to look really nice there. It's overbought, but who cares? Continues to look super bullish. And then looking at Microsoft, this is still a zone of resistance, 21 in VWAP. This actually looks like a pretty decent short off of this area just to pull back to that 200 around 467, my level 466.50. Then you could look for maybe a double bottom in there and then see what happens after that. But this looks like a pretty classic downtrend for now. Moving over to Tesla and NVIDIA. Tesla basically unchanged, sitting right on top of that trend line, still having the 55 EMA as a zone of resistance for 33.11. Don't love that, right? That is absolutely the opposite of what you want to see if this is going to stay bullish, right? We broke back below this 55, hit it every time, which has been resistance. You can actually trade off of that pretty well. If we close above it, flip to bullish. But if we continue to close below it here, which has been the case, that is going to be a big problem. And then looking at NVIDIA here, positive on the day, 0.86. It's right in this kind of no man's land of that 180 to 184 area. This has been the consolidation middle. If it can get above it, good, bullish. If it dips below it, we are bearish. Right now, the momentum is swinging to bullish. RSI swinging to bullish a little bit. This does look like a potential setup, but I'd be just a little cautious. Want to see that close above 184. Moving over to staples and discretionary. Staples pulled back a little bit, down 0.66, back below that 78.88 level, but you got this trend line acting as support, 9 EMA acting as support. You can see volume coming in there at that kind of buy area. So I think this is still okay. Still looks like a low, higher low here, high, higher high here, potentially setting up another higher low, 55 EMA as support at 78.02, and then discretionaries right at the trend line. We've been hovering on that trend line for the last 3 days, into the support level at 235.85. Really no changes to the thesis. As long as it's above it, we're bullish. If it dips below, that's a little bit more bearish. Moving over to Rocket. I got asked about Rocket, so I threw some lines on here, and you can see this overall bull trend, right? You got a really big spike up, round tripped this move, held support, and now we're breaking higher again. It's been really strong. Today was a little bit more of a sell-off, kind of surprisingly so. Your trend support's in here around 1910 or so. Your 9 EMA down at 1816. Really the move here is for this to go back to that high, right? 2150. That's where I think this is going, at least in the short term. I think we'll get to that level, and then if it breaks out from there, of course, obviously super bullish. That would take you above this previous high here, and then you can see this previous price action back here, right? Nothing really up until around $27. This is pretty choppy, and that is right at the kind of IPO, so it's hard to work with that price action, but in the short term, this is absolutely bullish here, and I would be looking for 2150 and then watching this trend line as your kind of stop loss, at least for now. Moving over to Breadth. Breadth did fade a little bit more here today. Still looking at this as bullish, right? Because you did break above this previous high here, got above that 60 level. Same on the 50-day. Nothing really changing there. Came down to this trend line and bounced a little bit. Like to see that. Same kind of thesis on the RSIs that we talked about. We broke above them, and now we're looking to retest those RSIs, get that higher low set up, and then potentially push. Moving over to the dollar. The dollar is not holding up as well as I wanted it to, right? We had this big dip here. Buyers came in, pushed it back up, and now it looks like we're selling off once again. The open here for the Wednesday also not great. 55 EMA still holding its support, so not everything is broken yet, but in the short term this looks a lot worse. We could still go back to this previous low and not be all the way broken. 55 EMA there at 98.97, but in the short term, clearly bearish. We've been selling for basically 2 weeks at this point. Moving over to bonds. Bonds actually did have a little bit of a recovery there. J&K back up about 15 cents after falling about 69 cents yesterday, so finding just a little bit of a bounce off of that SMA. We talked about that being a potential area of support, and we hit that zone and bounced. Now, is this a low, higher low here? And then you'd look for a high, higher high. That seems to be a pretty common trend across several of these charts, so that would be nice. And then looking at TLT bouncing off of that 200 SMA there at 88.40. That's the zone that needs to hold at this point. Right now we're at 88.80, so a little bit above it. Would like to see us get above the trend, get back above these dynamic resistance areas around $89.50 to kind of $90 or so. But right now this looks like a topping pattern with potential for a breakdown back to that 85.90 area. Moving over to the VIX here, you can see the VIX sold off a little bit more. The momentum is still bearish here on the VIX, although it is still kind of holding up at this previous low. Still think this is going to spike up from this area. I don't think we're going to go too much lower, but the timing on this can be hard, right? You can see a couple of days here. We've already been here a couple of days. You can see a couple of weeks here before we saw a little bit of a spike up there. So timing can be a challenge. Could be a couple days, could be a couple of weeks, but it will spike up at some point in the future. Moving over to my accounts, you can see I did put on that 100 shares in a covered call here. Bought it at 621.75. Right now we're at 622.60, so got a little bit of a move up in the after hours. Sold the 632s for $2, so that would give me a potential profit of about $330 or so over the next day, and that's what we're hoping for, right? Looking for that move up. And then this dollar position just continues to do nothing. I'm probably going to take a loss on this here soon if the dollar doesn't bounce pretty soon. Only got about 2 more weeks before that expires. Let me know down in the comment section what you think of tariffs. Are they going to impact the jobs market, or does the economy really care about tariffs anymore? Let me know. Otherwise, like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video. Make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.